Thanks, Joe. And thanks, Anthony and Jeff, for having me. I'm not going to speak about FEMA issues. I'm not going to speak about EFCA either, sorry. That's someone else. I'll talk to you about wage and hour issues since that's sort of where my expertise lies, given that I headed the federal agency responsible for enforcing those laws. Give me a second here. All of my funny jokes about standing between you and the tours of the stadium and drinks and are not going to work. So I'll just skip that. All right, let's go. Feel free to ask questions whenever you want. I think it's worth it more to you if you can address specific issues that you may have. Those people sitting kind of that way may have to wave your hand a little bit because I'm looking into the sun. And we'll just get started. So I'll talk to you a little today about three areas. First, the enforcement priorities for the Wage and Hour Division. It is a lengthy process that the division uses to come up with specific enforcement priorities at the national level, at the regional level, and at the local level. For you all, you just need to know that there are 9 targeted low-wage industries, and every office in the United States of America has to conduct directed or targeted investigations in at least one of those 9 industries, and on that list is security guard companies. So you are on the hot list of 9, so you can expect a lot of enforcement action. I'll talk to you a little bit about recent developments, both from the end of my tenure and the beginning of the new administration, and hopefully to the best as I can without a crystal ball, some of the developments that I see coming down the pike in the next year or so. All right. So just quickly so everyone knows, what does the Wage and Hour Division do? It has 5 core enforcement programs. Child labor, which stems and is probably one of the most significant areas that the Wage and Hour Division enforces because there's no private right of action for child labor. As I'm sure all of you know, you can get a private lawsuit under the Fair Labor Standards Act for minimum wage and overtime violations, but for child labor violations, it is the federal agency, the Wage and Hour Division, enforcing the child labor law. There is no private right of action. So that's a big portion of the Wage and Hour Division's efforts. There's agriculture enforcement. They enforce H-1B, H-2A, H-2B visa provisions. The government contract statutes, Davis-Bacon Act, Service Contract Act, all of the various Davis-Bacon related acts, which are various funding mechanisms that provide federal funds for some type of construction that is not direct government construction, that have prevailing wage provisions. The Department of Labor, in conjunction with the federal agency giving out that money, those entities are responsible for enforcing the prevailing wage provisions under those what are called related acts. And then the general federal labor standards, which are, again, minimum wage, overtime, and the Family Medical Leave Act are probably the biggest ones. 5 regional offices, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, San Francisco. They all report into the national office in Washington, D.C. 47 district offices. That means that there is a senior manager present in that office. It basically equates to 1 in every state, although New York has a lot more district offices and places in, I would say, the upper northwestern part of the country basically all report out of Salt Lake City. There's area offices, which means there's a junior manager on site, and then there are 136 field stations which are staffed by investigators. The most significant field station to me is one in Gulfport, Mississippi. I started with the department in November of 2005. A lot of my experience at the Department of Labor was in connection with the aftermath of Katrina. And the field station in Gulfport, Mississippi, when I was there, was in a FEMA trailer outside the federal courthouse, next to an active train track. So it was an interesting place. The district office in New Orleans was actually in, there's some irony to it, a Payless shoe store. So the Wage and Hour Division, responsible for enforcing the wage and hour laws, was out of a Payless shoe store for about 10 months before we could get office space in New Orleans after the hurricane. Wage and Hour Division does a lot of things: investigates potential violations, makes the prevailing wage determinations, publishes various regulations for the laws enforced by the Wage Hour Division, issues opinion letters, and then we do a lot of education. Sorry, I will say we from time to time. It still hasn't gotten out of my head that I no longer work for the Wage and Hour Division. My resignation was accepted promptly at noon on January 20th, 2009, and I no longer work for the federal government, and as of 2 days ago, I work for Jackson Lewis, a national labor and employment firm, in their Reston, Virginia office. In 2008, we're moving into the sort of recent developments. Just so you know, in 2008, there were $185 million in back wages recovered just by the Wage and Hour Division. None of the statistics I give you include any of the settlements or lawsuits that were brought as private actions by private attorneys on behalf of private citizens. This is all what the government did, and just what the government did. That $185 million came out of in the neighborhood of 30,000 different enforcement actions. And enforcement actions can range from what we call conciliations, which are typically last paycheck type issues. Strictly speaking, a failure to get a last paycheck, except to the extent that it implicates a minimum wage violation, is not really a violation of any FLSA provision, Fair Labor Standards Act provision. But as a customer service type function, the Wage and Hour Division, if they get a call from someone who hasn't received their final paycheck, will call the employer and try to work it out. And typically speaking, when a federal agency calls an employer and says, hey, can you give this guy his last paycheck, they have complied, and so there are a lot of conciliations done by the agency. There are what are known as directed cases or targeted cases, which is where all of the planning goes. It's based on the experience of the local office or data that's been filtered up to the national level and created a national priority. Every office has a targeted or directed program focused on industries where they're likely to see violations of the laws enforced by the Wage and Hour Division. There are complaint cases, which is just someone calls up the Department of Labor and says, hey, I have this issue with my employer, and the Wage and Hour Division goes ahead and takes that complaint and follows up and conducts an investigation. Typically speaking, a complaint case has a higher priority than a directed case. And I mean, it's pretty common sense what the priorities are. There's child labor violations will take priority over minimum wage violations. Agricultural working conditions, cleanliness of the work site and that sort of thing are going to take priority over regular minimum wage violations. So there's an entire scheme of which ones get more priority, and so a complaint case is going to get more priority over a directed case. What that means practically for you, it just means a directed case is going to come later in the process. It will take more time for the Wage and Hour Division to complete an investigation, a directed investigation, than it would to complete a complaint investigation, which on that slide is 97 days. So if there's a complaint, it takes about 97 days to complete, although sometimes the complaint doesn't actually start until sometime after the first call comes in. It won't be registered as a complaint until sometime after that call comes in, and then it's 97 days on average from when you're contacted to when it's resolved. In the low-wage industries, it was $57.5 million. All right, 2009, which we're in the middle of the FY 2009 session, the national enforcement initiatives are for child labor, bailers and compactors, recidivism. So if you've had an investigation in the past, you are likely to be targeted again in FY 2009. And obviously in low-wage industries with a specific focus on independent contractor issues, which I'll talk about briefly, and then in agriculture. So here are the 9 low-wage industries. Obviously, guard services right on that list. The list was developed probably 10 years ago. Prior to that, there were 3 low-wage industries that the agency focused its resources on: healthcare, agriculture, and totally drawn a blank. Garment manufacturing. And basically the agency realized